welcome everybody. And before we begin or get into anything specific or all our official welcomes, I did just want to quickly go through our translation instructions. First, our interpreters are Delia and Adriana. And this meeting will have simultaneous Spanish interpretation. As a participant, you will need to choose a language, either English or Spanish, to listen in Zoom. If you do not choose a language, you will not be able to hear the presentation. And that is what we're all here for. So make sure you do that. In instructions in your meeting /web controls, and you can see that on the presentation on the slide, click interpretation, click the language that you would like to hear. And this is, and of course, optional, this next part, to hear the interpreted language only, click mute on the original audio, click mute original audio.
I'm sorry, where do we go to do that?
Yep. So the image there, so if you go in your, pretty much I think at the bottom of like the screen, if you go to meeting /webinar controls.
What is that?
And then
I don't have that.
So on my screen, if people look down where the little mute microphone is and the screen and you scroll across, you're going to see that little global icon. And then you could click on the icon and then it'll give you the language options.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
thank you for that.
No problem.
Yes.
Done
So,
in true community health worker fashion. Thank you so much for your help, Natalie.
yes, jumping in there and put out with that, absolutely. And I know for Zoom it can be obviously a little bit tricky when it comes to our language and figuring out those pieces out. And yeah, so we are also having closed captioning instructions for the participants. For all of you, the Zoom webinar will have automated closed captioning. Closed captioning can be turned on and off throughout today's meeting. And to manage closed captioning on your computer or laptop, more instructions. So this is clear. Click the CC Live transcript, and what you see like in the image above, select show or hide subtitle to view captions. You can also select view full transcript to see the entire written transcript from today's meeting. And to manage closed captioning on your mobile device, because it's very real that individuals might have to be on their phone, go to Zoom controls and click meeting settings, and you can use the toggle button to turn on and off closed captioning from your phone. Right. So this is our official welcome. Welcome everybody. Welcome to Telling Stories Successfully. The Envision team is super excited today and grateful for the opportunity to once again be in community with you all and share this space and have the opportunity to be working alongside each of you. I know there's familiar faces and there's also some new faces as well. So we're super excited to be here. And the purpose of this month's webinar is to work through and answer the questions around what makes a story worth reading, what makes a success story more successful, along with the tools and tips and insights for CHWs telling their own stories and 2109 recipients navigating CDC guidelines. Our team will offer perspectives, hints, and how-tos to help craft a story worth telling and reading through this webinar and beyond the webinar as well. So you'll get those tools here, but feel free, of course, to reach out after if there's still questions that you have around telling a story successfully. And also, before we jump in, if you're wondering who I am, my name is Jamal Perry. I am a trainer with the Envision Equitable Healthy Communities Training and Technical Assistance Center. also known as Envision, as well as the CHW Council lead. I am currently located in Milwaukee, where I have been doing community work and have roots in the city doing CHW work and community health promotion, specifically around LGBTQ plus communities of color and anti-violence work and equity and sexual health education. So a little bit about me, and if you're wondering who the guy is speaking on this webinar. Right, and then we'll move into our operating agreements, specifically around Zoom. So just remembering to stay on mute and use the chat box for questions. You can write these questions throughout the webinar. There's no specific time. So if something pops up in your head or comes to mind, definitely use the chat box. And there will be time to get these questions answered or ask these questions, hopefully at the end of the webinar. Or our presenters will be able to, answer those questions directly in the chat, but feel free to write those in the chat. I myself will be monitoring that, and the team will be taking note of that. And of course, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And also just another point about the chat, it is, the point of contact for the webinar. So use it to introduce yourself, use it to connect with folks, use it to, chat, write, ask questions. Is definitely the space to just interact during this time. And today's agenda. So we're going to obviously give an overview of Envision, as well as a quick overview of our CHW Council. And then we'll get into telling stories. The wind is blowing in my apartment as I slamming doors. Telling stories successfully with John, Kara, and of course, Chirpal. And then we'll move on to our next steps and wrap-ups. All right. So who is Envision? So the Envision Equitable Healthy Communities CHW Training Center is composed of community health workers and community health worker allies who work together with financial and administrative support from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, to elevate the role of CHWs in COVID response and recovery. And of course, Envision Equity supports the CDC-funded program, CHWs for COVID response and resilient communities, which uses the acronym CCR, which we continue to use and you'll continue to see. And you can, of course, find these details about the initiative and who the funded organizations are at the Envision landing page, or specifically on the CDC website, which we will drop in the page, which Courtney just dropped that for everyone. Next slide. All right, and I will just do a quick introduction of the council. So this is our CHW council, which we will continue to elevate and show on every webinar. The Envision CHW Council is CHW led and is rooted in the Envision mission to elevate communities most affected by COVID-19 and to do so in the most equitable and effective ways possible, and also lead with equity. Members of the CHW Council support the overall work of Envision by bringing essential voices to the table, helping to define the Envision mission, advising on grantee growth opportunities for authentic CHW programming, lifting up diverse training and TA providers to connect with CDC, CCR 2109 grantees, and pretty advise all aspects of our Envision work. We are adamant about our CHW leadership and super excited to have this council be a part of that, and some of our council members here. So in the chat, if council members just want to reintroduce themselves, or just write in the chat who you are and you're part of the council, and folks could see that and connect with you through the chat and after this. And that is our CHW council. And just some quick Envision news. Envision is hiring a sustainability lead, and you can get more information on this through, well, more information on this will definitely be coming, but all Envision news and updates can be found on that landing page, and I think those have been dropped in the chat as well, or we'll continue to share that out. And without further ado, we are moving into telling stories successfully. So I'm going to pass it over to John. And remember just to use the chat for questions throughout this time, or anything you want to share, just want to talk about, definitely use the chat. And John, it's all you.
Thanks, Jamal. And thank you all for joining us today. I'm John Burton, and I am the creative director of Kinetic Health. We're a healthcare-focused marketing agency located in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, and we are also a very proud Envision partner. Today, we're going to take you through the process of telling your story successfully, and we'll do it in these steps. Begin with the importance of stories, some background on stories in general and why they matter, the basics of what makes a story worth telling with some tips from a respected and experienced professional, sharing your story, more tips and perspective from a CDC health communications specialist, an example and how-to of how a story came to completion using a worksheet we've put together to help you with your own storytelling process. We'll cover some resources that we're going to make available to you for your support. And with time permitting, we'll share some ideas and Q&A at the end. I'd like to begin with why we're focusing on stories today. Primarily because all CCR 2109 recipients are strongly encouraged to submit 2 stories per year that illustrate the work they're doing, the challenges they're facing, and the gains they are making in battling COVID, while also creating healthier and resilient communities. While these are often referred to as success stories, that should not be interpreted as having a focus solely on success. When the CDC is amplifying the stories that they'll finally receive from you, they'll use other terminology to describe them, such as CCR 2109 program spotlights or examples of funding in action. We bring this up because we don't want you to think that you have to have a significant success in order to share your story. We want to encourage you and support all CCR 2109 recipients, funded allies, and CHWs to partner in collectively lifting up the work you are all doing, and sharing your stories is a great way to do that. So part of the objective today is to have you not fear the blank story page, but rather embrace it as a place to start to bring your own story to all of us and our communities at large. We're hoping to encourage, inspire, empower, and enable all of you to share the amazing work you are doing. We want you to tell your story, and we want to help you do it successfully. So let's begin by looking at the importance of stories and how they have been a part of who we are as humans from the very beginning. Most likely from when that first story was told or drawn or sung or danced. Stories have served many roles over time, from nurturing to entertaining to educating and even protecting. They have played a vital role in shaping us as individuals and communities. And just as we have evolved as humans, so have our stories and the ways in which we tell them. But what has not changed throughout all that time is what makes a story worth telling and doing so successfully. But why are stories important? They help us explain difficult concepts or information. They spark our imagination and generate new ideas. They allow us to form a shared understanding. And most importantly, for here today, they are how we remember, because we tend to forget lists and bullet points. In looking at what makes a good story, we're going to focus on 2 types that we encourage you to use. Informative and factual, which aim to inform the audience about a specific topic and usually contain facts and data. And persuasive and emotional, which aim to persuade, adopt a belief or opinion, and usually contain an emotional element to evoke a response. For persuasive and emotional, I'll let you ponder this wonderful quote from Maya Angelou regarding persuasive and emotional storytelling. For informative and factual, we're going to share an illustration to bring home the point about how good storytelling brings data and information to life. So using Legos as an example of data, here's what you could do with this. You could sort data, you can arrange data, you can present it visually. But if you wrap a good story around that data, it can take on an entirely different and memorable form. And this is what we're going to try to help you do today. Now we'll focus on the basics of a good story. And joining us is Kelly Gordon, our content director and head writer at Kinetic Health. She's going to give you her keen professional perspective on the fundamentals of a good story. Kelly, if you can come off mute and join us.
Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you today. Thanks for having me. So the basics of a good story. I mean, who doesn't like a good story, right? They go back, like John was saying, to the beginning of time. It's how we've shared information, how we've shared our experiences. Great stories are universal. Across the world, people can relate and they identify and they remember information when it's shared through a story. And, you know, they all have a few basic elements. It's been said that the shortest distance between two souls is a story. And to do that successfully, I think one of the first steps is to intentionally take the time to observe your surroundings, to listen to the people around you, and even reflect on the potential stories that are probably happening around you each and every day, especially in the work that you're doing. There is fertile soil for stories all around you every day. So next, we observe, we capture, we record, we construct, we express. These are some of the basics of storytelling. What makes a story worth reading? We'll capture some of that. Mainly a beginning, a middle, an end, and a lesson, something to come away with. A takeaway is one of the elements of a good story. And what makes a success story even more successful? Well, to have some form, some structure, to have the data that we mentioned in the form of numbers perhaps, or other illustrations to share about the success. But really, I think the most important part is the foundation, the elements that you're probably already familiar with. John, next. A clear structure, for example, and a purpose. You know the purpose of your story already before you even set pen to paper or fingers to keypad. You know that you're hoping to share the experience, hoping to inspire others. You probably have a challenge that you overcame with a client or somebody you're working with, or an organization. There may be a conflict that needed to be overcome, an obstacle or a barrier to be removed. And at the end, we have the takeaway, the lesson to that journey, the conclusion. And that's what will inspire others to do more work like you. So first, remembering the greater purpose of the story, the plot. What's the story about? The character, who is the story about? Usually it's about a person, maybe a group of people. The theme or setting, where does it take place? Take people into your story by describing where you are. Maybe your reader's not familiar with the specific challenges a location might face. And dialogue, and I don't mean dialogue here like he said, she said. We're talking about the word choice, the tone, the overall message. Also important in this regard is remembering that your audience may not understand some of the groups that you're talking about. So avoid using acronyms, or if you're going to need to use acronyms for the sake of simplicity, use the acronym spelled out the first time, and then afterwards, you can use the letters that you're talking about. When that's what I mean by acronym. Like CHW, for example, stands for community health worker. So the first time I would use that, I would spell out community health worker, and after that, I could use CHW. The decor, how do we support the story? So the stories are good all by themselves with just the words, but when you have photos or data, graphics, numbers, flyers that you used, anything that you use to make your story successful, and I don't mean this, I mean the entire event, whatever made that successful would be part of your story, whatever you used to make it come to life and to have it have an impact on the people that you are working with. And then the conclusion, of course, what do we want our reader to feel or to learn or do? This would be called a call to action in some cases. All stories may not have a call to action, but some will. And that call to action might be to call a number or attend an event or a vaccination day or whatever that event might be about could inspire your call to action and dictate where that would take your reader. This is the heart of storytelling, is when there is a framework around which you can share your lesson and your information and do it in a way that's most memorable. So speaking a little bit more to the whole structure, going back to the beginning of human history, when people from centuries ago have thoughts about the best way to tell stories, I borrowed those previous thoughts from Aristotle with observing and capturing and using that format to tell your story. But I think that most stories follow a pretty simple spine or a timeline. I mean, we talk about how once upon a time there was a person, place, or thing. And every day that person did X, Y, or Z. And then they did it again and again. And then one day something changed. And because of that, something else changed. And because of that, this is the result, this is the takeaway. And finally, we want you to go out and do the same. That's, of course, really simplifying it. But I think that for your purposes, simplifying is a good thing. And it really helps to know that you, like John was saying, you don't need to be intimidated by the word success. You have stories all around you that should get out there and be told. Okay. One of the bigger tips, and I think that we will hear from Sherpal a little bit later about how he brings this one to life, is to show and not tell. For example, maybe people you work with or a group of people you work with, a certain person has had a struggle finding employment, and you connect them with employment resources or resume writing services or a job search service. Instead of just saying, John was having trouble finding a new job. He applied to lots of jobs and nothing was happening. Put some numbers, some data behind that. You could say the exact number of applications he put out there before he found success after being connected with resources. Maybe he applied for 102 jobs and hadn't heard a single word, or he had participated in 17 interviews, but it was only after being connected with the resource that he was provided with that he eventually found success. That kind of detail is what we mean by the devil's in the details, and show, don't tell. Instead of saying he had a hard time, show what a hard time it was. Most likely, your first draft won't be your last. And that's not just because you send somebody your story and you have a second set of eyes looking at it. It's because if you take some time to think about your story, your draft, come back to it the next day or maybe a couple of days later, chances are you're going to remember other details about the story that might have made it even come to life a little bit more. Okay, and finally, just some final tips when you think about telling your story. Knowing your audience, first of all. Remembering that not everybody will be familiar with your acronyms, with your location, with the details of the story that you are most familiar with. So describing those a little bit more fully when appropriate. Write what you know. You know the work you do, you know the people that you work with. Just remember that and focus on that. Spelling out acronyms, again. And using paragraph breaks. I always say, especially when writing for the web or writing for an audience that you might expect to skim your work or skim your reading and skim their reading instead of reading it word for word in detail, use paragraph breaks. When in doubt, use them more often than not. Every 2 or 3 sentences, You probably are changing your subject enough to use a paragraph break. So that makes the reading of big, huge blocks of text a lot easier. And for web reading, less is more. That does mean more paragraph breaks, 3 or 4 sentences per paragraph at the most, not having multisyllabic words followed by lots and lots of commas and conjunctions, just keeping each sentence to a line or 2. And again, show, don't tell. Describe the journey that your client or the person that you're working with had. Don't just say they had a hard time. Describe what that meant for them, what that meant for their family, what that meant for that marketing. And always include numbers and specifics whenever possible, especially if you had support with marketing collateral like flyers that you placed, or advertising, or whatever you use to communicate with the audience that you were wanting to reach could be included in this story to bring it to life and to give other people ideas for how they might reach their respective audiences. And those are my tips for storytelling and the basics of storytelling. And I welcome any questions either now or at the end.
Thanks, and we encourage you to drop those in the chat for now. Thanks, Kelly, for that. Moving forward, we want to now focus on getting your story out there. And joining us is Kara Abshire, Health Communication Specialist from the Office of the CDC. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Kelly, for having me today. For those I haven't met, my name is Kara Abshire. I'm a health communication specialist here at CDC in the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. A big part of my portfolio is supporting the work of CCR, Community Health Workers for COVID Response and Resilient Communities, funded organizations. I know many of you are on the line from either a directly funded recipient or a partner of those organizations. So welcome. I look forward to working with you and meeting you virtually. Headed to the next slide, I'm going to start my comments today on dissemination. Oop, can we go back one? Dissemination is getting your story out there. A good story, looks like it wants me to hurry up and talk a little faster. I'll keep moving on and hopefully the slide will get there too. Getting your story out there, having a good story, showing change or showing a takeaway is really important. It's to make sure that people know what that change is. They have to hear it. The story has to be told. And for you all on the line, the public health workforce, much of the work you do on a daily basis might go unnoticed by the communities you serve without these stories and without getting the message out there. So stories help people making decisions, whether in government or in other places, to understand the impact of public health. And from a training perspective and peer learning perspective, it helps programs learn from each other. Thinking about CCR specifically, especially at a time when resources are limited, communicating the achievements of these programs is crucial. And when intentionally shared and widely shared, it can provide avenues for more funding or more resources. It can increase the partnerships or the participation, the support that you have from external partners. And it can allow other programs to duplicate your work and to find these successes in their own programs. For you all, that means determining what's the best way for you to get your story out to the people or groups it was created for. And what should be who or what should be the messenger of your story. So on the slide here, you see a number of different formats that could be used. And the question to be asking yourselves and asking your colleagues is, which of these will help me best reach the people I'm trying to reach? Kelly mentioned the reader. I could call that group also your audience, and to really keeping that group in mind throughout the process. And regardless of the format you choose, sharing your story in more than one way is always important to help get the message out there. So as you look at this list after the presentation today, feel free to check all that apply and think about the different ways one story could be formatted for each of these types of media. Now, for CCR 2109 recipients, I want to especially highlight the website that's pictured here on the right side of the screen. It's the National Association for Chronic Disease Directors' What's Working in Disease Prevention and Control Success Stories database. It's quite a title for the database, but it was created to help policymakers and chronic disease peers be able to see in one place comprehensively evidence-based and innovative programs that have reduced the burden of chronic disease in their communities. We're mentioning it today as a potential tool to help you share and disseminate your story, but also as a reference for examples of successful stories. You can browse and filter stories from this database by topic. And if we haven't already, we'll drop the link to this database in the chat now. In thinking about ways to get stories out there, I want to move on to the next slide, which talks about considering CDC within your storytelling planning and your dissemination. As John mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, CCR 2109 recipients are strongly encouraged to submit at least 2 success stories per program year in AMP, although that's certainly not a limit if you'd like to submit more. By regularly submitting and updating stories, it'll allow you to track the evolution of your CCR funded program and also demonstrate the timeliness of your work with these almost real-time updates. For me at CDC and on the CCR program team, the success stories that CCR recipients submit help to see the positive impact that CCR funding has had on the nation's public health capacity. And thinking about our audience, we're really looking at a national level. And so as John mentioned, we may use success stories or excerpts as program spotlights, in responses to congressional inquiries, in program-wide email updates, or in presentations that the leadership of our center at CDC is doing, including those shared with public health organizations. If your story is selected to be shared, we will always work with your program's leadership first to talk about any editing, revision, and the use case. In fact, some of you on the line may have already been working with me to prepare an update to the CDC website that would include 3 program spotlights. We'll be sure to communicate out across recipients once those go live so that everyone can take a look at what your peers in CCR 2109 are doing. For stories submitted to CDC, guidance instructions with more details like the ones you see pictured here are available on AMP. And we'll drop that link in the chat now. AMP is the award management platform. And for those of you that have access, that's also the place that you'll be submitting these success stories. Before we turn our attention to AMP, I want to talk just briefly about this guidance document. It concludes a 4-part framework and also includes submission logistics and how CDC might use your submission, a lot of which you're hearing in this webinar today. And so I want to reiterate that today's webinar will really help you set you up for success in the success story progress. So just being here for this hour and a half is a great start to the storytelling. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, which includes a screenshot of the award management platform. A couple of things to highlight. When you log into AMP, the deliverables tab on the award page is where you can find success story submissions. You can submit both of your stories for year 1 to this portion of the platform, and that's the box you see highlighted at the bottom. On this slide, you see a couple of tips. First is that we prefer Microsoft Word files, but AMP supports a wide variety of file types, so there's certainly some flexibility with this. The next is that you can upload multiple types of files, multiple files to the same deliverable. And so going back to what Kelly mentioned earlier around decor, please feel free to include quotes, to include photos, to include flyers or other materials. We'd love to see any of all of those uploaded to accompany your story. I do want to call out that if you're uploading any kind of media that includes people and those people's faces are showing, please include a signed talent consent form for those people. CDC's talent consent form is available on AMP within the communication and media section, and I see it just was dropped into the chat now. As of last week, we've added consent forms in Spanish and French to accompany the one in English. So you may want to revisit this resource page if you haven't taken a look recently. And last but not least, and certainly an important tip, there is a status alongside this deliverable in AMP. You can see it on to the right of the screen. Please change the status from in progress to submitted for review if you're the one submitting the success story. This is how CDC's program staff like myself and your project officers know to take a look and see what you've uploaded. I want to quickly cover some of the things we look for in featuring a story. And on the next slide, you'll see some main points that I think align really closely with what John and Kelly have already talked through. So clicking to the first piece here, easy to read. I think Kelly mentioned several times the importance of defining acronyms to have a flowing narrative that your reader, your audience should be able to stick with you from beginning to end and really see the change that you're exemplifying in your story. You can keep sentences short, avoid jargony language. And if you haven't seen the newest insurance commercial, the one with the gecko on the topic of acronyms, I'd encourage you to Google it after, because I think it will really resonate with those who work in acronym heavy environments. The second thing that we look for is attention catching stories. Compelling success stories are memorable, relatable, and inspiring. They communicate change and paint a picture of how your program's making a positive difference. And so once again, keep your audience in mind. Tell your story in a way that matters to your audience and inspires them about your efforts or your program's efforts. And last but not least, this ties closely back to what John started us out with, is to focus on the current results of your efforts, whether those be emotional or data-driven. The key point here is where did funding tie in when stories are submitted to CDC? And I want to remind you to not just focus on future or expected outcomes. A success story is to include what's happening now and as many quantitative results as possible. So moving on, I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk more about telling a story on a high level. So if we can go to the next slide, this is something you've already heard me mention a couple of times, so I'll keep it brief. When starting to tell your story, keep your audience in mind. Who are they? There are quite a few potential audiences listed on this slide. Please see it in reference after today's presentation. But in thinking about the audience, try to put yourself in their shoes. What do they care about? Next slide. The second thing to focus on in telling your story is what to actually write about. We've gotten quite a few tips already from both John and Kelly about where to find inspiration. The first piece that John already mentioned is not to let successes stop you from getting started. And so this slide is here for your reference. What are some things that could be framed as successes, whether it's positive experiences, lessons learned, infrastructures that changed? All of the above are important. I see some things already typed in the chat, and so I'm curious, as we continue to the next slide, feel free to start throwing out what are some of the topics that you might write about in a success story. Feel free to keep those coming in the chat as we move on to these other types of inspiration. So these 4 types of inspiration that you see on the slide are some program level starting places. So for those directly funded CCR 2109 recipients, the first place to find inspiration is those with whom you do the work. Whether they're CHWs, allies, or partners, your stories and experiences matter. And we hope this webinar empowers you to tell them and get them out. And so for program level staff, what are some formal or informal strategies that you can start to implement to gather success stories and the stories of those with whom you're doing the work? The second place for inspiration is the CCR 2109 Notice of Funding Opportunity Strategies. For those who have spent a lot of time in the NOFO document, as we abbreviate it, It's a long document, but as you're looking for inspiration, think about each of the strategies, or maybe just the 3 high-level strategy categories of train, employ, and engage, and consider framing a story around each across the 3 program years. The next is past CDC deliverables. So for those who were involved in their year 1 annual progress report, there was a section called successes. Those successes could be a great place to use as a starting point for your success story submissions. And then looking to the future, as I mentioned, you can update stories for timeliness. So in future years, if you've had additional impact or a chance to achieve other outcomes, consider using this approach by updating past stories to provide your partners with the most up-to-date information. And that way you're continuing to demonstrate the relevance and the timeliness of your program. All right, moving on to the next slide. I'm going to turn it back to John, who will walk us through a worksheet that aligns a lot with the things we've just talked through. As John talks, I'll try to get caught up in the chat and answer any questions, perhaps a bit delayed. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. That was great and very informative. I hope it was for all of you as well. We want to focus now on this worksheet we've developed that will help you craft your own story. A link will appear in the chat for you to go out and get it. It will come up again later. So this, you can either get it and follow along with us, or get it for your use later. What we've done is we created this 2-page PDF form that has 4 basic parts or buckets for you to drop your text into, which then can be used to wrap a narrative around and become a program spotlight submittal. First, let's talk about some notes about the worksheet. It's directly aligned with the CDC success story guidance that Kara just mentioned and covered a bit in her previous section. It's been created to be a helpful tool for brainstorming. So use it like a notepad for thoughts, bullet points, keywords, phrases, any relatable bit of information you can think of. Some of the things Kelly brought up as well, just these points that will help bring your story to life. Within each step, there are 4 broad questions that are for consideration and corresponding bullet points that are also suggestions for many of the program staff who are going to tell stories to get more details about their funded program. Despite the detail of some of the questions, the 4 steps apply to everyone. For those of you who are not directly responsible for telling stories about programs as a whole, we do recommend that you take a look and consider using this framework. So let's take a look at the 4 steps individually. Step 1 is the challenge and background overview, which is basically what prompted your organization to act, wherein you can describe the challenge, locations, a community background, work plan strategy, if that's something you can answer, and also data that framed the challenge. Step 2 is the approach. How did the CCR funding address the challenge, and what approach was taken or what actions were taken? Provide some details. Specify how the CCR funding specifically supported the efforts, and explain how this approach addresses the challenge. Step 3, the results. What were the immediate outcomes for your program? Describe the results in details, include data, how many CHWs were trained, uptick in statistics on inquiries, vaccination rates, etc., and how many community members were reached. Step 4 is the lasting impact and what's next. And this is the only section that speaks to intended or possible outcomes, but it speaks to things, how you continue the positive impact of the work. How is this a catalyst or a launching pad for work to be continued beyond COVID within a community, and what actions were implemented in other programs and organizations. So this is a brief and simplified overview of the worksheet, which the link has gone into the chat to get for you to use as a framework to begin pulling your story together. And this includes everybody on your team that would all use the same 4 basic steps and put in their notes, and the story can be crafted around that. But enough of this, let's talk about an example. And a CHW that we have with us today who's going to come on and tell their story, which we will then, after he's done, take it through the different basic steps and show how his story fell into the document that we created to help you frame your own story. So I'd like to introduce Sheriff Hao Vang. He's a bilingual CHW working with Sheboygan County Health in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and he's generously agreed to join us today and share his story with you. And once he's done, like I said, we will take his story, his narrative that you would just have heard, and take it through the form that we have for you to work with. Sheriff Hao, are you there? Can you come off mute and join us?
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Yes, by looking at the number of participants here, I'm very intimidated, but after listening to Kelly and Cara, humbly talk to everyone made me feel comfortable here. If you don't understand what I'm saying or because of my accent, feel free to ask me a question. Again, my name is Hao Vang, a bilingual community health worker for the Sheboygan County Division of Public Health in Wisconsin. I'm here today to share my experience with everyone. My name is Hao Vang. Actually, my name is pronounced Sepal Vang. So in the English word is Hao Vang. That's okay. Why I got my name as a compound name, let me tell you a little bit background of that. In our culture, a surname or compound name is given by to a man after he get married, and that name is given by the in-laws. That name is meant to be respect in the community, and to the community, which means I am a married man. So if you see a compound name or a surname with the original name, is a married man. Yes, I have lived in Sheboygan County for more than 37 years. Many in the community know me from my work in the past as a refugee resettlement program. Sheboygan County is the third largest Hmong population or Asian population in Wisconsin. I got hired as bilingual community health worker for the Sheboygan Public Health. My role is to outreach to the Hmong community, and that at that time, in the beginning of 2021, the COVID vaccination rate is low. And when I got into the department, I realized that it's very difficult at that time, and everybody know that every place are closed. It's hard to go to places that public places. And also, I also realized that language barrier, and there are not very many educational information regarding COVID. And for that information, I decided that people are not just stay home and not eating or not have a meeting. So the places that I know that people will go, such as churches, grocery store, they will go shopping for at the Oriental grocery store, or family celebration or wedding. So I spent time and go to those places, stand in front of the grocery store, talking to people when they come shopping, wearing masks, and hand out information, flyer, my contact information, and with other places such as wedding or churches, and where they celebrate family celebration. With that in mind, we don't have very many information. And again, because the COVID vaccination rate are low, and so we are doing as much as we can with the material. So we get some material from public health, from state CDC. Usually they don't have a translated material. So when we do have translated material from state or public health, normally they are too lengthy, too hard to read, and make people even confused on all the information that we have. So I use my time to rewrite the information, make it more simpler in plain language, and create more visual, so people will see and understand and get information. And that the community, the public health offer pop-up vaccination clinic all over places, but still not enough. Later on, we public health able to offer once a week walk-in clinics, and that is the big kicking that we're able to reach out to people, tell them that we offer weekly, 1 day a week at public health walking, no appointments need, no phone call, just come, and we, the CHW worker, will be there to assist them. So that's ensure them, those people that we contact. And then we, week by week, we people come more and more to our walking vaccination clinic. As a result, our COVID vaccination rate for the Hmong and Asian community is surpassed the majority community in the Sheboygan County. My takeaway point to you is that building trust in your community is a key to success. One thing I learned from my experience that when people you contact or you meet them, when they show up where you are, you better be there, because to show that you are real, you will be there for them, you will support them along the way, and re-educate them or retell them that we assure them that you will be there to help them in the future if they ever need any help. I will tell you one scenario that one case that I encountered during my working for public health. During my contact meeting outreach, I met a middle-aged man during a vaccination clinic, and I give up I give him my flyer, brochure, contact information. I talk to him, tell him what I do at public health, and what I can do to help to assist the community. And a couple of days later, he called me, complaining of his chest pain, and I realized that it's not good. I advised him to go to the emergency room right away. So a day later, he went to the emergency room. He was diagnosed with a heart disease, a heart condition. and he was transported to a close by hospital for bypass surgery. And I felt great because if he didn't call me and I didn't have to say anything to him, I would not have saved his life. And I feel that I have saved his life because I have encountered him, met him during my outreach. And what is my what is my next step? I have a best partner working with me. She also community health worker. She working side by side with me with the Hispanic community. Her name is Marisola, and he's part of me. We are sharing ideas, sharing what we have to bring to our community. And we realize that reaching out to the community, meeting one-on-one is not enough. In order to reach out to our community so that our community have equal access to all the service in the Sheboygan County, we have met or we connect with other leaders in the community that have the same mind as us, that we need to provide equal access to the underserved community. So with that, we come up with a group called Sheboygan United Group. Consists of the leaders from community, partner for community development, family and youth resource from UW Extension, Safe Harbor for Women Shelter, a member of the Sheboygan County Board have agreed to join us in that effort with myself and my partner, Marisola. Together, we offer family resource to the community, targeting the minority community, Hispanic community, and the Hmong and Asian community. So far we have done 3 community resource that we provide resource. We bring other partner community to the resource fair and offer information to those community, and that is not it. We wanted to continue that effort, so all the minority community have equal access to the community at large. So that's what I believe, and that's my story. And if you have any question, welcome to ask me at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharpal. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. Now that you've heard Sharpal's story, what we'd like to do is show you how that story was taken, and using the form that we're making available to you today, how his story dropped into those 4 buckets or 4 parts and became the submission story that Wisconsin will be submitting to the CDC. Those 4 parts, again, being the challenge, the approach, the results, and the lasting impact. The challenge. As you heard, Sharpal is a CHW with Sheboygan County Health, and they recognize the gap within the Hmong community with regards to COVID vaccinations, and that vaccination rates were lower than rates among other community members. Awareness was seen as part of the challenge. Additionally, he knew the members of this community were possibly experiencing both language and other barriers to receiving healthcare information and services they needed. The approach. He approached the Hmong community members and began to meet them where they were rather than waiting for them to come or find him. He went to places where the Hmong community members congregated, their churches, social events, grocery stores. He engaged them directly and left them with support materials, including flyers and his business card. He talked to them about vaccinations and educated the community members about the science and safety of the vaccines. He left support materials in their native language with contact information and calls to action on them. Funds from CCR 2109 grant were used to finance the educational materials, the business cards, as well as the time and effort of SharePow himself. Third part, the results. As a result of SharePow's strategic outreach, vaccination rates among the Hmong community increased. Phone calls to Sheboygan County Health increased. Inquiries about services and health visits increased. This is a perfect example of where supporting data would be inserted or noted as a place to be dropped in when it became available. Policy change. After witnessing the positive impact from SharePow's efforts within the Hmong community, Sheboygan County Health has initiated an effort to add a CHW position to be included in their public health strategy. And the new connections to services, which was beautifully illustrated with SharePow's story about connecting with the middle-aged Hmong community member with whom he left a flyer about a vaccination pop-up clinic. He had also left him his business card, and later, when that person experienced chest pain, they called SharePow to inquire about what to do. SharePow encouraged them to go to the emergency room where they were diagnosed with a heart condition that required immediate bypass surgery. This connection to SharePow, a CHW, likely saved the community member's life and further demonstrates that connections that CHWs make go beyond immediate COVID-19 response and work to promote healthier, resilient communities. And lastly, lasting impact. Having this effort reinforced, SharePow is motivated to continue to meet Hmong community members where they are, connect with them organically, and continue to build trust. He also continues to encourage other CHWs and public health workers to do the same, reaching people where they are and being willing to share information, connection, experience, and resources. SharePow has also played an integral role in the newly founded group Sheboygan United, which connects community members to resources. A link will go in the chat so you can all check out this amazing work, but once we're done here, of course. So let's look. Don't expect you to read this, but this is the submittable version of SharePow's story. Once the Wisconsin team had the 4 basic steps of the story, they were able to piece together a single longer narrative of SharePow's story that they will be submitting to the CDC via AMP as one of their program spotlights. We're going to make this story available to you, so you might review it along with other supporting elements as a model for telling your own story. We'll also be posting a copy of the worksheet filled out with SharePow's story so you can see how the basic components of the story came together. It's a working example of the approach that we're sharing with you today. As we wrap up this example, let's look briefly at some of the supporting materials that the Wisconsin team pulled together for SharePow's story. We're showing these as an example of what you might think of gathering to submit along with your own story. And a reminder to what Kara pointed out earlier, there's no limit to the number of files you can upload in AMP. We're encouraging you to adopt a more is better approach when it comes to the story length and supporting material. And before we move to the last portion, I want to lift up and thank the team members of the Wisconsin Department of Health Services Chronic Disease Prevention Program and Sheboygan County Health, who contributed their time and effort to this webinar. They were gracious in sharing their stories and perspectives, giving us this perfect example to share with all of you today. What to do next? Before we go into this, I've been alerted that Kara wants to come back on and address something from the chat.
Thank you, John. Yes, there are a fair number of questions that have come in, and I think now that we've heard SharePow's story and seen, even if in small text, the Sheboygan County's potential submission, I wanted to answer a couple of the questions that have come in. So the first is around the requirement for success story submissions. It's a strongly encouraged submission. So 2109 recipients, the 2109 Notice of Funding Opportunity states that you are strongly encouraged to submit 2 stories per program year. And so we strongly encourage you to do so. The second question that has come in was around length or word count. Going back to the dissemination slide that we talked about, if you're picturing the different modes that were on that slide, length of story may really vary. A Facebook post or a tweet about the success of your program would be much shorter than what you may have seen on the screen today. As John mentioned, we encourage you to have a little bit more, especially with your submission to CDC. And 1 to 2 pages is a general recommendation for the length of a submission for the CCR 2109 recipients into AMP. The last question then that I want to address while I'm back on screen is around audience and confusion around audience. If you were scrolling through the chat, you would see that Kelly responded with a fair number of suggestions that I think are a really helpful starting place. So if you're sharing your story by social media or in a newsletter across your partners, your stories may be geared more towards a public audience or an audience specific to your community, and keeping that in mind. You may have stories that you want to frame specifically towards the leaders in your community, those who can make change. For AMP submissions, for things submitted to CDC as part of the CCR 2109 Notice of Funding Opportunity, we encourage you to think nationally. We have a couple of audiences that we keep in mind in telling the story of how these funds are making a difference in your communities and how your programs are putting them to use. The first is the public. We have our CCR CDC website and social media accounts that we'll use to help tell the story of the important work you're doing. We also talk to you all. And so whether it's webinars like these or email chains, we hope to be able to help share your stories with each other, in addition to the other ways you're connecting with your peer 2109 recipients. And last but certainly not least is those decision makers. CDC has presentations with other public health organizations. We receive inquiries from members of Congress, and in preparing those presentations or preparing responses to those inquiries, we'd like to be able to help share your story and amplify them. Those are the big questions I've seen come in so far, so I'll keep monitoring the chat and come back on if anything else pops up.
Thanks, Kara. Okay, we're at the point what to do next. First, get the worksheet, distribute it to your team, start to pull together the thoughts and ideas for your story. And remember, you don't have to wait for the data to get the basics of your story down. That will come and you can drop it in later as supporting information. And just as important is the fact that the worksheet is for everyone to use. They need to be able to answer all the questions that are in there in the suggested bullet points of the form, but they can drop the basic elements of their part of the story into the same bucket. And that way the contributors and the people who will put the story together will have everything in the same place and make it much easier, just as the Wisconsin team did. Second, talk to your team, your allies and CHWs out in the field, having those one-on-one interactions. Get their impressions and notable, emotional, and evocative tidbits that help bring these stories to life and make them even more relatable. You can reflect and draw upon what you've just seen and heard with Share Powell's story and how that went through this very process we're outlining. Third, submit your story to the CDC, the link in the chat that you've seen and the guidelines and tips that Kara has shared with us today, and along with the supporting elements that you've gathered. Fourth, look to your local and regional outlets for getting your story out there in long or short form, be it the tweet, Facebook post, Instagram story, or the full-on submittal that might be a couple of pages long. And last but not least, relish in your accomplishment for having done the work that created a story worth telling and for doing it successfully. So moving forward, let's just go through the list of the resources that we have available to you. Again, the worksheet, the link's probably been in the chat a few times. Go get it, put it to use. SharePower's story in both the worksheet format and the submitted form, which is the long form Word doc, and as pages as an addendum with support materials inserted into it. The AMP talent release form that Tara has brought up, can't stress this enough, if you're going to use anybody's photo, that accompanies it so that the CDC can amplify your story knowing that the person who's being photographed is agreeable to it. And this one, which is going to be a big one for you, the Kinetic team is going to offer a half-hour consult on your stories where you can send a draft and we would either edit or provide suggestions. And this would be an AMP request. So it's for recipients to go into the communications and media category and specify.
Yeah, what's up?
I just letting you know that I found him.
Okay, that's not for me. Request via AMP, select communications and media category and specify success story consult and description, and it will make its way to us. And now we have the follow-up community of practice that we will be putting on. We're actually scheduling to have 3 of these in the next 3 months, 2-hour sessions that are CHW specific, for CHWs to come and do a 2-hour community of practice where it'll be a smaller group and we will share ideas and processes. So I think somebody on the Envision team is going to pop that poll up. And this is, we encourage you, if you're interested in a CHW, that you respond so we can reach out to you and let you know when those are scheduled. And there we have it.
The poll is launched. It'll only take a minute or so just to
Yes.
do that.
And while the poll is up, we're going to move into the story ideas. And this is something that those of you who are not responding to the poll, you can start to think of and engage in the chat. What's your story? Let's drop topic ideas, or if you've already produced the story and it's out there somewhere, drop the links in there. Seeing other people's story, just as we've illustrated with SharePows today, can be a very impactful and informative way to spark ideas and thoughts for others who are maybe struggling with what to write about or how to even approach this. And if Kelly or Kara want to come on, or if you're viewing the chat and want to throw some of those up there or respond, welcome that. Because I can't see the chat.
I'm not seeing anything come in yet in terms of options. And so I think, John, folks may be wrapping up the poll and starting to type in what some of their ideas are.
Great.
Hey, John, I'll just chime in a little bit about the community of practice so people have some background on what's going to be happening during their time. So as John said, they'll be once a month and they will be 2 hours in length. And during that time, the community of practice will discuss things like Ariadne lifted up in the chat. What's the best way to do social media posts? How do you work with your community partners? And then also create the stories that we talked about today, using this webinar as a starting point for that. And then telling each other's stories to each other. And I saw there was a question in the chat, is this just for CHWs? Absolutely not. This community of practice is meant to bring people together in a community. And so community health workers, community health worker program managers, 2109 direct recipients in state government, county government, tribes and territories. This space is a space to also build relationship across the different roles that are involved in making CCR successful. So please complete that poll. If you have folks that aren't here today, or if you didn't get a chance to fill in the poll, we will bring in others and be offering this through our newsletter that Envision sends out once a month. So you'll be having other opportunities to either join in yourself or share it with folks that you think would also be interested. Appreciate the questions and the interest.
And we're now at a point where we can engage questions. If anybody has them, drop them in the chat. Kelly and Kara, if you can monitor or.
Sure, I'm starting to see them come in now, John. It looks like there is a story that was recorded in a magazine of the lower Midwest. So folks can check that out. Thank you so much for mentioning that in the chat. It's exciting to see how folks' stories have been shared.
Terry, is there a link for that story? It'd be most excellent to see how we could get at that electronically as well. So if you have that and pop that in, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, Jamal, I think you can probably move us on. And if there's any more that questions come up, we can go back to that and or answer at a later time.
All right, so I'm going to end this poll now. Let's see. Okay, so now as we wrap up, first, just definitely want to thank the whole team and all the presenters, John, Trapal, Kelly, Kara, everyone for just going through that. And like Sherry said, definitely if you are interested in the communities of practice and following up with that, definitely follow up with us. Definitely, if you didn't get a chance to do the poll, definitely follow up or write in the chat as well. So now we are going to quickly launch another poll. And this is just a poll to pretty much the satisfaction poll. How do we do? How did this go? So I'm going to launch that. And while that's launching, we'll go through some other quick next steps. Okay. Let's just open that. All right, and everyone sees that poll that is up. So if you want to take some time just to go through that. Yes, so all the materials, all the, the PowerPoint, all the information, the links, all the questions you all have, and us following up with that will be sent out via email in a pretty much a follow-up email. Also, accessible via AMP in the Envision landing page. The webinar does go on YouTube. If you did not know that, you are able to access that as well. And just also a reminder to register for the August webinar, which will be COVID Law, which will be focusing on the effects of COVID in our communities and the effects of COVID on CHWs and the communities they serve, and really focusing on those long-term effects and how CHWs and their communities are navigating through that. So that link did get dropped in the chat. And then the Envision YouTube page just was dropped as well. We'll probably take another 2 or 3 minutes or so, or people finish faster with the poll, and then we'll definitely close out. Or if you are finished with the poll, you can actually just hop off. And definitely thank all y'all for joining us for yet another webinar. Look forward to seeing you all next month for COVID Long. And thanks everyone for joining us once again.